Inside Boxing Daily on the Gruely Truth Sports Network. Inside Boxing Daily is brought to you by BetNow.eu, which I think everybody on here probably lost money on Keith Thurman this past weekend. But we got a 50% bonus on our first deposit, up to $1,000. So make sure you go to BetNow.eu, use the promo code TRUTH50, or go to GruelyTruth.com, click on the BetNow.eu banner, use the promo code TRUTH50. We are also brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation with Jackie Richardson and Alex Ramos. Make sure you check them out. And Seat Giant, where you can use the promo code LEGEND. I am your co-host for Inside Boxing Daily, Mike Goodpaster, and right now I'd like to welcome in my co-host, Jeremiah Preisser. How you doing, Jeremiah?
I'm good, man. Let's talk some boxing.
And we have a special guest tonight who wrote what I think collectively we all agree is the greatest book in the history of boxing, maybe in the history of all literature, with Dennis Taylor. Yep. Pictures by Ed Mulholland. You can find them on Amazon. Intimate Warfare, the story of the Gotti Ward trilogy. Help me welcome to the show, lead writer at Max Boxing, John Raspanti. How you doing, John?
Doing great, Mike. Man, that's quite an intro, but it's all true. It is a great book, so please check it out on Amazon. So, yeah, it's great to be with you guys as always.
All right, so our news tonight is not good as Russian welterweight Maxim Dadashev bought the most important fight of his career. He was 13-0, fighting Puerto Rican Sabriel Matthias. Both fighters at the time, like I said, 13-0. It was a huge fight for both of them. The fight was pretty even for about half of the fight, and then Matthias just kind of took over. And, of course, the fight ended tragically as Dadashev passed away today. I'm going to start off with John because he's older than Jeremiah. And, John, we've both been watching boxing for a long time, and we both have seen this before, and we still love boxing. On a night like this, my wife sits there and she says, why do people even do this? What would you say to somebody who asked that question?
Well, it depends on the person. That's what I would say. I would say some people do it because there's nothing else they can do. It's their only chance to get somewhere, make some money, a lot of money, and they're willing to risk it all for that. And a lot of the other reason is, even though it's hard for people to understand, some people, as they love it. You guys have talked to boxers, you know. I mean, they love what they do, and it's the hardest thing in the world for most of them when they retire. So for me, we're always going to have a hard time understanding because you're hitting someone else, you're getting hit in the head yourself, and we're cheering, and we want the knockout, which could be fatal. So there's always going to be this mixture of emotions, especially with this. It reminds me of Bud Schulberg, the great writer, Mike, Jeremiah, who wrote On the Waterfront, Harder They Fall, who said, I love boxing and I hate boxing. And that's kind of how it is. You know, you do love it, and then on nights like this, when we're talking about the death of a 28-year-old, hatred is there, maybe guilt for cheering when guys are hitting each other and one is hurt, one goes down, and you're like, yeah, way to go, and really hit. So this is the first time in my life where it was closer to home, though, because I spoke with Max on the phone a few weeks ago when I did an article about him on Max Boxing, and he was just such a upbeat, nice kid. Of course, makes it worse. I mean, you can't say, well, if he was a jerk, it would have helped. He's still a human being, but he was so excited. And he loved being here. He loved America. He told me that the people are so much more polite here than in Russia. And he was just so excited. I mean, I was in a so-so mood that day when I did the interview, but after talking to him and his friend Stan Martinick for a half hour, it got me in a better mood. So when the news hit, when I heard it this morning, I I was basically devastated. I mean, almost like he was a family person, someone in my family. Not that he was, but it was just close to home, much closer to home than usual, harder to back off from than I might normally do, where when you write about the sport, you have to be impartial. You have to be almost detached at times. Not this time. I couldn't be everything. And then, of course, Stan was telling me about him, about Max, about his family, about how Max's family was coming out here, how he helped him get an apartment. There's just so many things, and just like that, it's over. So yeah. I think the reality of this sport that we love, that it can end just like that. I mean, I was hoping that, even though I didn't feel that confident about it, that maybe he would do like an Adonis Stevenson thing. But I read that he had severe brain damage. Severe. Now, I don't remember seeing that about Adonis Stevenson. I mean, I figured he had brain damage, but Max's condition was just really bad. They took off part of his skull. You guys know all this. It's just terrible. You know, this is the thing about boxing that, like I said at the beginning, you love it for one hand because of the guts and the determination and the will to win. And then there's this, when this happens, and you're like, wow, is it all worth it? But for some people, going back to the question, it's their only option. And that's why I've always loved boxing other ways, is that a lot of these guys, they never would have made anything of themselves. They would have ended up in jail. They would have ended up dead. So they took a shot. And unfortunately, sometimes this is the result. And it's just a total tragedy, Mike.
Yeah, and Jeremiah, I think when we look at the fight, the thing that stood out to me, fairly even fight. I think the fight was stopped at the proper time by Buddy McGirt. I think that, you know, we've seen this before where guys will just let the fighter go out anyways. But when we see this tragedy in the ring, it is Johnny Owen going into the 12th round with Lupe Pintor. It's Dooku Kim going into the 13th or 14th round with Ray Boom Boom Mancini. Or it is Ernie Scaff, who suffers the injuries of the fight before that. A Willie Klassen, guys like that. These are usually not the big, brutal first or second round knockouts. You see Deontay Wilder detonate Dominic Brazil. This is usually the kind of fight where this happens, where it is just kind of repeated. It's a guy that can take a punch, has a lot of heart, against a guy who punches good, but he's not a huge puncher. And just the accumulation of damage is what ends up being the issue here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, and that's the thing about boxing that makes it one of the most dangerous sports in the world, because of the the possibility for sustained punishment. I mean, this is why I think, MMA actually has it right in a way, because they've got small gloves. And from what I'm aware of, again, I'm not a scientist. There's not a whole lot of and this is an unfortunate aspect of the sport as well, is that there's not enough money coming into the sport dedicated to research purposes. So a lot of us are just dealing with a study here, a study there, nothing concrete. This isn't, it's not an organization like the NFL or the MLB, where they can, divert funds, and it's ever changing. And, we can get these things that are up to date. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of data to back this up. But I mean, from everything that I'm aware of, it seems as if clean knockouts are better for your health than, like you said, the sustained action fights where you're taking a lot of punches. And that seems to be the case. I mean, again, we're not working in a lab in white coats or anything, but, the examples that you're pointing to are making the points that we're all talking about. So it's unfortunate. And I do think that it was stopped at the right time. I mean, we can sit here and pontificate and say, oh, well, what if he would have stopped at the round before, or, maybe he would have had a slightly more time and maybe they could have saved him. But it's all very touch and go when you're in the ring and you're in between rounds and, you've seen a guy take punishment for, you don't know what his propensity is. And I mean, it's a very touchy subject, and it's hard to know exactly when the right time is a lot of times, because you don't see what's working internally in a guy. So it's tough, but I mean, good for Buddy McGirt for at least stopping the fight, seeing that his fighter was in distress. He had that blank stare on his face, which, will probably haunt Buddy for, the rest of his life, maybe even Matthias. But yeah, I do think it was stopped at the right moment, but it's just a real unfortunate event. I mean, you would have just hoped that things would have run a little bit smoother ringside. They could have got him to the ambulance a little bit quicker, maybe had a stretcher because they had to walk him. It seems like things could have been run a little bit better, but again, it's a very touch and go kind of thing. And, there's always room for improvement, but again, it's touchy.
All right. So we have a question from Steve in California who wants to know why headgear is not required, John.
Well, it's required in the amateurs, and obviously, as we know, it used to not be years ago. But that's a very good question, Mike and Jeremiah, because I have a friend who has told me repeatedly that he thinks that's the reason that sometimes the damage to the brain it happens to some guys, because you're not only fighting for a living, you're also sparring and you're wearing headgear, and when you get hit in the head, it's like you get hit twice, because the headgear also jars your head, squeezes it, whatever, it jars it, boom. So it's a double whammy. You get hit in the head, you get hit in the chin, a double header, whatever you want to call it, and it's worse. So you take all of these things into consideration. Like Max had 281 fights, and we were talking about off air, Mike, a few hours ago, that he had actually been getting hit quite a bit in his last few fights, and had even gone down. And I had asked him, did you see the punch? And he said no. And that's the thing about boxing that Jeremiah said that is so true too, is that sometimes it's everything that's going on and there's no way to know. But I don't think that in professional boxing headgear would ever happen, because this is going to sound really terrible, but part of it is the thrill of the two guys going in there just with trunks on, basically, and gloves and boxing shoes. It's the gladiator aspect, and that's why we like it. If they put headgear on, it'll feel like it's the amateurs, and people won't like it. I think. I mean, it's probably the smart thing, even though, as I said, my friend doesn't believe that maybe they could create some headgear that they could test and make sure that it fits correctly and it's not causing more of a jarring effect when somebody gets hit. But that's always been the difference. Well, not always. As we said, I remember when Sugar Ray Leonard, I don't know when they started wearing headgear in the amateurs, but I can sure see Sugar Ray Leonard.
If I remember right, real quick, I think it was Olympic-wise. I think it was 1984.
Okay, well, yeah, that was probably right. I could see Sugar Ray Leonard, no headgear. Obviously, George Foreman, Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, all before that in the 60s. So it made it more obviously the amateur game. I mean, almost think of it like when you think of college baseball, where they're allowed to use aluminum bats, and then you can't use it as you progress, and it's almost like it separates the amateurs and the professionals or whatever. So I don't think it would fly, even though it might be a good idea. One of those.
Well, Yeah, I was going to say that I personally, I wouldn't like, headgear to be introduced in the pro game. I mean, I don't even know if there's any evidence that supports that it actually helps. I mean, I know Teddy Atlas has talked about this topic at length, and I'm not even sure there's proof that headgear helps. But this is my thing: is why don't we move in the opposite direction? I referenced the UFC earlier. Why don't we just make the gloves smaller and make knockouts more likely? Again, if we don't know, or if the evidence doesn't say that headgear actually helps, and they eliminated headgear from, it's no longer in the open classes anymore. So the amateurs don't use it either, except anything below the open class, you're using headgear. But the open class, the best guys in the world are not using it anymore. But of course, the gloves are padded, and there's still a difference there. You're not getting Reyes gloves, and the fists are packed tighter, and there's less padding around the knuckles. It's not quite like that. But my thing is make the gloves smaller. I mean, why do they increase the size of the gloves anyways? I mean, we reference guys like Joe Louis when we're talking about the past, and there's all these knockouts and whatnot. And again, if the evidence says that knockouts are better for your health than sustained punches over the long haul, then maybe that's the direction we should go. Of course, you ask a bunch of fighters anyways, and we often talk about the fights that ultimately do it, but a lot of fighters will tell you that some of the biggest wars that they were in were actually in a gym sparring. When you're using headgear and you're using bigger gloves and stuff too. So, I mean, it's just a sport where, your body is not meant, it's not naturally fit enough to take that amount of punishment. Of course, there are some guys like Jake LaMotta and stuff who seem to have like Neanderthal skulls and are okay in old age. But again, even if you have some of the professional fights and they're having bigger gloves or headgear or whatnot, again, I don't think that's the right route to go. I think you're going to lose fans. I mean, boxing is already on the decline. I don't think that's the way to shore up the problems. I mean, to me, that's just a Band-Aid on it. I think you move in the direction of smaller gloves.
All right, got a question. We have a listener who thinks that boxing should probably not exist, and he wants to know if we can call him and add him to the show to ask you guys questions right now.
Fine.
You cool with that,
I don't
Jeremiah?
care.
Okay.
I'm cool with it.
All right. Y'all know him, too. He's a basketball player, which means he's kind of a girl. So, let's... I'm sorry, John. John was a basketball player. Actually, so was I.
So were you.
I know, but it's just the way it is. I mean, I didn't want to make fun of myself, so hold on.
Why not?
I got to type this number in. Hold on. All right, being added now. He's from California, so he's a liberal like Raspanti.
Hello.
All right, we have Steve Risley on the line, who used to play girls basketball at Indiana University, where he won a 1981 national championship. And I know Steve, because we've had this debate on Survive and Advance before about the headgear, stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
fire away, because I know you think boxing is a stupid sport.
Well, I don't understand the purpose of the sport. I mean, the purpose is to knock somebody out and make
So
them
is football.
unconscious.
Football is too.
Well, no, really, it's not. It's to score touchdowns in football.
No, it's
That's
to knock
the difference.
people out.
No, that's what happens because of the violence of the game. But boxing is just a sport that is nothing more than to put the other person down on the ground and make him unconscious. That's how you do it. And I don't understand your passion for that and your love for that, and say, let's make this game smart and let's make it strategic. We have technology today that we can put headgear on these guys and score points and win on points and do things. I agree with Jeremiah. Lighten up the gloves. The gloves, 16-ounce gloves, are heavy. And I don't understand why they don't take this sport and make it more strategic than barbaric.
Okay,
That's my question.
I can answer that question because people won't pay to see strategic. It's just like people like home runs. People like touchdowns. When I watch
home
the
runs
sport,
don't kill people.
well, this
Home
is the
runs
thing.
don't kill people.
This is the thing. But playing football does, and I would make the case that there's probably, even though there's a lot more boxers in the world, there's a lot more football players that have lingering damage than there are boxers, John.
No doubt. No doubt. Yes.
So you don't rail against football. They wear helmets.
No.
And it's probably more dangerous. Hold on. Football is more dangerous because they wear the helmets. It's not safer because people would not use their helmets in a football game or their heads in a football game unless they had a helmet on. And I think this, from the boxers I've talked to with the headgear, there is, I don't know, John, I know you've talked to a lot of boxers. Jeremiah has. There's kind of a sense of security when you've got the headgear on, John.
Yeah, that's true. And the debate about the gloves, you guys know this. They went to the bigger gloves because they thought they would be safer, amazingly enough, because they were eight ounces back in Joe Louis's day, and then they made them 10 and 12, thinking that was better than the smaller gloves because the smaller gloves were more deadly. And it makes it tricky because if you have a fight like we just had where a guy's hanging on or he's in the fight and he's still fighting and he's absorbing a lot of punishment, my thinking is that perhaps the whole thinking of that should change, meaning that there have been fights where I'm sure you guys have seen where the fighter has lost 10 rounds. It's a 12-round fight. He doesn't have a chance. His only chance is to land a big shot, and that's not going to happen. Instead of, and this is controversial too, I know, but instead of letting it go, stop it right there. And a lot of times it doesn't happen that way. You know, pull the plug. Don't let it go longer than it necessarily needs to go.
And that's a great question. That's a great question, Jeremiah. Do we need to better train our referees in the sport to control the match better than what they're doing? To let it go, because I agree. I watched MMA the other night, and I don't like MMA, but I watched it, and I watched these guys kick guys in the nuts. I mean, they're coming in there with their knee in the nuts, kicking guys, and I'm watching. It's it's not boxing. I get that, but do we need to train the referees to be more in control of the sport?
Listen, I've talked about this with Mike a good number of times, and this is what happens. Okay, so whenever something tragic happens, a lot of people like to get on their moral high horse and talk about the dangers of the sport. We know that. We know what the inherent dangers are, and then when you get into safety, it gets touchy because this is what it is. With boxing, okay, it's an archaic sport, right? Two guys punching each other in the face. It's hard to rationalize. A lot of us, however, are kind of working with these, these libertarian, values where it's like, you can do what you like so long as there's consent and you're not hard, along the principles like John Stuart Mill and whatnot we're writing about on liberty, right? So a lot of us just kind of allow people to have the freedom to do what they like, right? So long as they're not, if there's consent, and
as long as they're not hurting anybody else.
Exactly. So that's the principle which a lot of Americans work on right now. And this is my thing is there's a caveman inside of me that watches boxing, and I want to see more knockouts, right? This is the thing is if you take boxing, professional boxing, and you move it more towards the amateur sport, you're going to kill professional boxing off, or you're going to move it to an even further niche than it already is. And this is the thing is, a lot of people, like, as a human, I'm also an animal, right? So there is this sort of like caveman, like I like seeing these guys fight each other and, get bloody and whatnot. And then on the other hand, there's the rational animal where I'm like, well, we got to emphasize safety. And there's a conflict between the two. And you would think somewhere in between you would have to come down to the sport. And this is the thing is, sports, they're really a form of entertainment. And when you're working with a niche sport like boxing, and you do things like you're talking about, Steve, where you train the referees to jump in sooner than they do today. Even though to be honest with you, the referees today are quicker to jump in than they were 40 years ago. I mean, all you got to do is go watch Mike Williams versus Bo Jack, and you'll see how some of these guys let it go. So the referees are better trained today in the sense that they don't let it go as long. And so from a fan's perspective, it's, do I want to see a referee jump in? I don't know. I mean, the thing that makes boxing so beautiful, in my opinion, is there are no ebbs and flows like it in any other sport because of the violence aspect. Okay, in baseball, you may have, a team down by 6 runs and they're going in the bottom of the ninth and some team comes back. But it just doesn't strike me as profound as somebody who gets knocked down twice, looks like they're reeling on the ropes, and somehow they turn it back around. I mean, that's why, we talked about boxing movies and why these are some of the most, watched and loved in history because, of the violence aspect. But my thing is not necessarily that you need referees to come in and stop it sooner. I just think you need this is my thing. I think you make the gloves smaller, so knockouts are more likely to happen. Again, it looks more violent, and I think an innocent bystander would probably watch it and say, "Wow, that's actually better for your health than taking punches." Because you could take punches to your head for 10 rounds and not weeble or wobble or fall down, and then you could get clean outs. But the knockout is better for your health than the sustained punishment. So my thing is you need to emphasize the violent aspect of the sport. And I mean, the thing is you need to train judges and have them, they do need to be very acute to what's happening inside the ring, but they also need to be playing in that in-between ground too, where, hey, it's also a sport. This is for, entertainment purposes, and it's a violent sport, and this guy could, be potentially brain damaged for the rest of his life. It's very touchy. I mean, when the stuff is happening in real time, it's very, very difficult to say, hey, this is the point, that's the point. It's tough, man. But I think you emphasize the violent aspect of the sport, as maybe counterintuitive as that sounds.
All right. Can I interject? Because I'm going to tell you, I want to give you an example of a different sport that made changes. In 2001, Dale Earnhardt in NASCAR died because of lack of safety protections, and he died in really not a bad crash. It wasn't a bad crash that he died in. But the sport has changed itself so much now that they wear protective gear, they wear Hans devices on their helmets. They take care of themselves now. They built the car stronger. They've done everything. And that's a sport that's done. It's a violent sport. NASCAR is a violent sport. It's much like boxing. They crash each other at 200 miles an hour. And they do things that we have no clue what they do. And how does it differentiate from boxing to NASCAR? And NASCAR made the changes that said, we have to protect our players. We have to take care of our players. Is boxing taking care of its players?
Boxing has never taken care of its players. The NFL's never taken care of their players. Now, NASCAR, since safety and all that came into play, the ratings have bottomed out.
No, they haven't. Actually, the
They
ratings
haven't?
are higher than NASCAR right this year
Well,
than they've ever been before.
All I know is this, though, because you keep telling me
I
that the
do a
ratings on
NASCAR
NASCAR
show
have dropped.
on our website, Mike, so I know. So don't trash me on this one.
I didn't trash you on anything. I'm just saying what you have told me in the past, that the ratings were down. You've even done shows with Alex about why the ratings were down and how you could get them better.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
But it's safer. It's
okay,
a safer
this
sport.
is the thing.
You had a person die.
All right, how about this? This is my thing. The reason I love boxing is it is life. Life is not safe. Sometimes you take chances to get what you want in life. And if you listen to the start of the show, the thing about boxers is predominantly they are very poor. It is their way out.
Mhm.
They are fighting to get out. There is a beauty in that because you have somebody that may not have another way out that decides to fight for what they want. And when I watch boxing and when I watched what happened Friday night, that makes me feel sick to my stomach. But the majority time when I watch boxing, I see two men that are basically fighting for their lives. And I don't mean necessarily, I mean, it can be for your life, but you're fighting to provide for your family. It's why when you look at sports movies, most people put the Rockies, the Raging Bulls, the $1 Million Baby in the top 10. There's not many basketball, baseball, football movies like that because it's not a sport that's the same. You see these guys, and you hear people all the time, well, that fighter's a bum. There's no boxer that's a bum because there is a very small portion of this society that would have the balls to go in shorts on national TV in front of thousands of people and test their manhood against another man. Now, I think society as a whole has lost that want, that need. I think that's why boxing is not as popular as what it once was. Because, former civilizations, what it was in the 30s with the Depression, the 50s, the 60s, those people got it. Today, there's a lot of people that don't get it. And you don't play boxing. Boxing's not a sport. You can't play boxing. Because if you play boxing, you're going to get hurt. And the thing is, there was a guy on a card that I watched this weekend. I think it was the Dillian White card, John, where the guy was like 10 and 165. That guy's still not a bum. Because that guy's going in there and he's trying to feed himself. He's trying to feed his family. This is his way to do that. Dale Earnhardt didn't grow up poor. He decided to get in the car and risk it. But he had other choices. If you're born in Russia, maybe you don't have another choice. And that's why it's not stupid. Now, if you have a lot of money and you're rich and you grew up rich, it's kind of stupid to box. Because when you fight another man whose very livelihood and whether he feeds his family depends on him kicking your ass, that's what makes boxing great. It's sad that there's people in this world that have to fight to get out of their situation. But you know what? It's really dangerous to drive a car. But people do it. And people don't wear helmets when they drive to work. But a lot more people drive to work and end up dead than box. In boxing, it happens, once every other year maybe? If that. So what you have here is it's still a nominal percentage that die, and it is still the most beautiful sport because it's two men imposing their will on each other and their skill. And in the end, that's why I love boxing. And it makes me feel sick and ashamed sometimes when I watch it. And boxers are not taken care of the way they should be. And when I watched this fight Friday night, I'm watching it with my wife, and he starts to stagger when he gets out of the ring. My only question is this. If a fight is stopped in the corner because a fighter has taken too much abuse, he should immediately be put in an ambulance and taken away. With a brain bleed, the 15 or 20 minutes they waited there may have made a difference. Probably not in this case because of how bad they said the brain bleed was. But that needs to be taken care of. The other thing is the day before weigh-ins needs to stop. It needs to be the day of the fight because you get guys, I mean, let's face it, the guy Dadashev was fighting looked a lot bigger than him. You know, and then you have, and we've talked about this, Steve, in almost every sport, you have the PED usage. And I'm not saying that, you know, Matthias was on PEDs, but I'm just saying this stuff needs to be patrolled. We've got a guy in Canelo Alvarez that is treated like a great and a giant at a sport who tested positive for PEDs, and they let him fight 6 months later. My claim is this. With football and boxing, you either allow PEDs for everybody or you ban anybody the first time they get busted for it, because in football and boxing, you literally are playing with someone else's life when you use something like that. So it's either got to be all-encompassing, everybody uses it, or zero tolerance. You use it, you're done. I don't care what your excuse, what your tainted meat was. But in the end, to me, boxing all comes back to two men in a squared circle basically testing themselves against another man. And I may be wrong there. It may be barbaric. But I think there is a certain beauty in that. There isn't in any other sport.
Yeah, and I would just jump in real quick. I would jump in real quick, Steve, and just say that Mark Twain actually said something similar. He said, if you've never been at your physical peak, essentially what he was saying is you don't know who you are if you've never been at your physical peak. And I think there's a certain beauty in that as well, is that, you know, being who you are, knowing what you can do, what you're capable of, you know, just, I think there's a certain beauty in that itself. But you can go ahead and chime in, Steve, if you like.
Can I say something real quick, guys? You know what? I've talked to boxers a little bit about this in my life, and you know what? They're good with it. And I think that's important, meaning that if something was to happen, which they obviously don't want, with the life that they have provided for themselves and their family, with maybe their only option, like, say, a Rocky Graciano and a Jake LaMotta, who would have ended up in prison and dead anyway, with what they are doing, if something was to happen, they're okay with it because they love what they do. And like I said, they don't want that to happen, but they're at peace. And I think that it's the same way nowadays with the guys that I've talked to, that they know the risk, but the reward is bigger and they're going to do it. And in any risky sport, like car racing, for example, the money, the glory, it's worth it, and that's life sometimes. It's like Mike said, you got one shot here, you better go for it if you're going to go for it. Now, if it goes wrong, we all feel bad about it, but it's not a coincidence that boxing is called the sweet science, because, Steve, there is a strategy involved. It's not two guys just walking up bombing on each other. There is a lot of strategy, but because of the way the sport is, things can happen. But I'm in total agreement with why I love it so much is, one, it's an individual sport. It's mano a mano. It's you and the other guy. You are going to have to figure out what you're going to do to beat the other guy. And there's a beauty in that. If you're a competitive person, and I'm sure we all are, you want to win, and you have to think, okay, how am I going to beat this guy? What am I going to do? You're thinking of the other stuff. And when you have that going on in a boxing match, when there's strategy and there's what's going on and they have to dig down deep, it is like life. It is like, okay, I've been kicked and I've been knocked down, but I'm going to fight my way out of this. And when a guy wins, I mean, like Mickey Ward and Arturo Gatti, 3 fights, brutal fight, incredible heart, incredible gut, made themselves legends in a sense because of
they'll
it.
be remembered 100 years from now for those 3 fights.
Yes, exactly. And that's my point, I think, is that what happens to these guys, like, I mean, this, I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm saying it anyway. I would say that if Max Deserdorf was on the show right now, he would be devastated that happened. He's going to miss his wife. He's going to miss his kids. He feels terrible about it. But he was a warrior. So he went out the way he would like to go, on his sword, basically. He obviously wished he was 80 years old instead of 28, but he was doing what he loved. And as I said at the beginning, when I was talking to him, the passion, the love for boxing. So the whole thing about it is with boxing, it's not black and white in a lot of ways. It's complicated with human beings and good and bad. But I think that's why so much of us love it, because it is a survival thing.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. If it's true, if that's true, and it is a game of strategy, as you said, why didn't you put vests on the boxers, helmets on them, and score points and do it that way and win that way?
Because it's not supposed to be safe.
Hang on.
It's just
You
not.
can talk, Mike. Why is the ultimate purpose is to knock somebody out cold?
It's not.
It's not.
Doesn't get it.
It's not the
No,
purpose.
it's not. Because not everybody can punch that hard. Take Paulie Malignaggi. His goal in a fight wasn't to knock everybody out. Steve, he couldn't break an egg. He had to go in there and move around and outbox a guy. I mean, and to me, his balls were the biggest because he knew, and everybody knew, that he couldn't hit it. He couldn't punch that hard. So he had to have a strategy. Not just him. Willie Pep, one of the greatest fighters in the history of boxing, he couldn't punch that hard. He had to win other ways, with his legs, with strategy, with his brain. Muhammad Ali wasn't the biggest puncher in the world, Steve. He had to beat guys with moxie and strategy and his jab. So it's not just, like I said, it's not a tough He-Man tough contest. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah, and if you look at the greatest fighters of all time, Jeremiah, the Sugar Ray Robinsons, Marvin Hagler, Joe Gans, Sam Langford, Benny Leonard, all those guys won because most of the times they were smarter than you, but if it came down to it, they would be tougher than you, too.
Yeah, well, and that's the beautiful thing about boxing too, is it's like watching like a stylistic thumbprint every time out. It's like each individual guy has a style unto his own, and you see that play out in real time. It's not like, football is fine. It's that way with any sports, right? It's like maybe you got strong pitching on this team, but this team has good hitting, and we'll see how it plays out. Boxing is more interesting to me because it's individuals, and you have pure boxers like Willie Pep, you have pure boxers like Paulie Malignaggi, but you have spoilers like Sammy Angot, like Sam Solomon, for instance, guys who would just rough you. I mean, there's so much going on in there. There's so many different stylistic variances. You have Miguel Vazquez, who was a spoiler. You had straight up brawlers like like tons of guys who would just come at you with their hands up and just throw heavy punches. I mean, it is a game of strategy. I mean, it's not if the intention was just to go in there and
helmets and put pads on and get marked.
I would never watch that. I would never watch that.
Because boxing is okay. You can't simplify it that much, though, because boxing knockouts are ingrained in the sport, and again, they should be. They provide an element of entertainment that you don't get in amateur boxing. That's why people don't follow amateur boxing like they follow professional boxing. Here's the thing, though, is Steve was talking about put a vest on, put a helmet on. Okay, if you want to watch two guys. Go at it like fencers.
Yeah.
Go watch fencing. That's fine.
Somebody died.
Yeah, but you know what? I would never watch fencing, but if they used actual swords and didn't have padding on, I would watch that.
Yeah, hell yeah. But here's the thing.
That's knuckin' fudge, Mike. Come on.
No, that's true, though. I would watch that.
That's knuckin' fudge.
Well, actually, there's a real.
But I would watch that.
No, but here's the thing,
You wrote a great
Steve.
article on Chuck Hughes, the
Steve,
Detroit Lions player who died on the field for the Detroit Lions. You wrote a great article on that.
Yeah.
About how tragic that was.
It was tragic.
And it was tragic. And you don't want anybody to die.
No, I don't want anybody to die.
That's not the end of sport. You guys are missing the point here in a big way.
You're missing the point in a big way because you don't understand it because you've never done it. I mean, I know I've been in a ring with gloves on, sparring at least. I know Jeremiah has. I don't know about John. John has. And the thing is this. You find out a lot about yourself in that situation. And if you've never done that, there's a lot you don't know about yourself. Because most people that watch boxing and call a boxer a bum are guys that never had the balls to ever get in a ring and put gloves on to see what the freak they were. Because they were cowards. And the thing is this. Until you test yourself against another man, I mean, that's the beauty of it. That's what you're missing. And it is tragic anytime anybody dies. But the thing is this. It all comes down to this. In the end, we all die. Do you want to die testing yourself? Or do you want to die sitting in a chair calling somebody else a bum?
Right. Well, and not only that, I think the thing, I think a lot of us are trying to say, like a lot of people are like, well, how do you rationalize, boxing because of the inherent danger? Well, okay, we've got evil Knievels in the world, guys just, racing motorcycles off of boards and over canyons. And, we've got guys who are, throwing themselves, like they used to do, throwing themselves off of barrels in Niagara Falls. I mean, you can't, the thing about being human is you can't rationalize everything because we're not only rational animals. This isn't all we're about. I mean, it sounds nice in a nice, tidy Western world that we live in, but that's not all we are. That's not all we've ever been. We can't sit here and say, hey, you can't do something just because there's an inherent danger involved. Honestly, there's an inherent danger involved in me driving down the highway when I drop my kids off to daycare. I mean, I see new skid marks on the highway every time I go there. I mean, somebody's making a bad call. They're on their phone. They might run into me. You never know what the next day brings. And, it does seem a bit odd watching two guys punching themselves in the face, but it's really not that odd. Guys have been doing this stuff for millennia. The Romans were putting people in with animals, putting animals in with animals. Again, there's a certain caveman aspect to us, and you can't just tease it out because you want to.
Okay, John, that's good. That's great.
That was Jeremiah.
What has the sport, Jeremiah, John, whoever's talking, I don't know. What has the sport done to improve itself and make it safer for the boxers? Every other sport, NFL's tried to get better helmets. They've tried. And it's still a fucked up sport. We get that. Major League Baseball needs to expand the fences out to now, because now all the way to the fields. Everybody's trying. What has boxing done to expand itself to make the sport safer for the athletes to compete?
Well, this is the thing. They have not made it safer.
They've done nothing, Mike.
Yeah, that's what I just said.
No,
they've not done anything. But that has nothing to do with the sport. I mean, because the thing I saw when I saw this fight was the fact that they should have had him to the emergency right away. I know there was a fight over here in Erlanger, Kentucky, which I know I've brought up before, between Dale Crow and former partial heavyweight champion Greg Page. Page was old. Crow was a young guy. Crow basically knocked the crap out of him over 10 rounds. In the 10th round, Page goes down, doesn't get back up. And with the boxing commission in Kentucky, number one, it was called the Kentucky Wrestling Commission. And there was no ambulance, there was no EMT. It took 25, 30 minutes to get him, and it basically ruined the quality of Greg Page's life. The problem is there's no commission, there's no national commission. But then again, there is a commission that's supposed to protect players in the NFL. And the NFL is a league that up until about 5 or 6 years ago, because of the concussion movie, wouldn't even admit that getting hit in the head was a bad thing for you. So you can sit there and you can say they've done nothing. The NFL actually tried to act like nothing was wrong. Everybody knows boxing, you can get killed. And in football, up until the last 5 or 6 years, the NFL did nothing about it, and the NFL still does nothing about it. They pay it lip service, but when it came time to pay the concussion settlement for the players, they're not doing that. And see, I think the thing you're missing is this. Every Sunday, you watch NFL, and you love it. And it's more dangerous than boxing possibly, because look at how many football players end up maimed for the rest of their life, even if it's not brain damage. Guys with 20 knee surgeries. And that is for your entertainment. So when you watch football, Steve, how do you rationalize all of the carnage that you see on the field that you know is going to ruin these guys' lives later in their life? How do you rationalize watching that?
Okay, I'll address that. In my opinion, in the NFL, and they've got it wrong too. They don't get it right either. They're not perfect, but their objective is to score touchdowns.
See, it's not, Steve.
In the boxing,
Steve, I've coached football for a long time. The majority of players on defense are looking to take somebody out, and they're looking to do it violently. And if you've ever played like a Division I college football game, the shit that goes on at the bottom of a pile would blow your mind. And I'm telling you this, defensive players,
I've been there.
You haven't. You played Division I college football?
No, I played Division college basketball.
Okay, and you know this yourself. The shit that people do in a college basketball game that you don't see would blow your mind. So imagine switching that to Division I college football, because those guys are looking to hurt you. This is the thing. If I'm looking for a middle linebacker on my team, I want somebody that's looking to take somebody out. That may be right. It may be wrong. It's probably wrong. But you're trying to inflict. You're trying to inflict physical damage.
I mean, it's not an option.
It doesn't matter whether it's an option. It's always an option because, Steve, in the end, we're all going to die. And number one, if somebody's trying to physically harm me, it's my job to try to physically harm them. Whatever happens, happens from there.
Well, yeah, and isn't it the...
Then we lose the value of sport.
No, see, this is the thing. Listen, you lose the value of sport when you turn it into patty cake.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's true.
Patty cake.
Well, what I was going to say, what I was going to say in relation to that too is, in boxing you may get damn near instant death sometimes, but you've got to understand the toll that football takes on guys too. I mean, we're talking about offensive linemen who are, some of them they're upwards of 270 pounds, sometimes a bit bigger, and they're putting all of that wear and tear on their body, which, it can barely handle it anyways. A lot of these guys, to beat the pain, they're getting on, they're having painkiller addictions. But I mean, a lot of these offensive linemen and defensive linemen, because they're so big and they're doing things that their bodies are not, naturally able to withstand, a lot of these guys are dying in the 50s and 60s. So,
well, how about this? Right now, I just pulled this up, Jeremiah, because I knew where you were going with it. And the average age for an average person to die is 74. The average age for an NFL player who played 2 years or more to die is 54. You shorten your lifespan by 20 years.
Yeah.
And so, once again, Steve, why are you all right with watching that?
I root for my team.
No, it's the same reason. It's the same reason, Steve. Steve, it's the same reason that we like boxing. You don't like boxing, but you like football, and it's the same thing, because when you watch that, you know these guys are never going to be the same again. When you go in a boxing ring, and who was it I heard say this? Timothy Bradley said he used to tell his wife, take a good look at me, because win or lose, when this fight is over, I just lost a piece of me I can never get back. And I think you could say the same thing for football players walking into an NFL football game. You lose a piece of yourself whenever you do that. And that's why they don't live as long. That is the risk they take. And with boxers, they've always known the risk. With football, they were lied to. They just were. And you can sit here.
I go back to my original statement and says that I think football has taken, and again, I'm not trying to defend football. I think that they're screwed too. But I think that football has done things with Rydell. And
no, they haven't. There's nothing you can do with the helmet to make it safer. No, they didn't.
They tried to.
Didn't.
Boxing has done nothing.
I'm sorry,
to make
Steve.
it safer.
Steve, if you think the NFL gives two shits about their players,
no, I agree.
You're out of your fucking mind.
I agree.
Well, then don't tell me they tried. What they did is they paid lip service. They paid Rydell money to do something different to a helmet. If you get hit in the head, I don't give a damn if you got a helmet. I don't care. Wait, see, this is the thing. This is the thing. You bring up the boxing. What have they done? Now, we just established football's done nothing, but you still watch football. They haven't tried to do anything. And boxing has tried to do things. Boxing shortened title fights to 12 rounds from 15 rounds. I think the last 15-round fight was what? Was it Kevin Seabrook or something, 1987? Yeah, you had the death of Dooku Kim in 1980. Was that 2 or 3, John? 1982?
82. Yeah, 1982.
Yeah, you also had the death of Willie Klassen. That was around 80. You had Lupe Pintor, who took out Johnny Owen in the 12th round, killed him in like 1980, 81. After those 3 fights, and then you had the brutal Pryor Arguello fight, 82. I think that was either a week before or a week after the Pryor or the Dooku Kim fight. Boxing basically started to go shorten the fights from 15 rounds to 12 rounds. So, yes, I think right there is more than the NFL has ever done to address their concussion situation, because boxing addressed it in the mid-'80s. The NFL didn't address anything until about 2014.
Okay.
No response?
Well, another thing to know, Steve, is that, as Mike pointed out earlier, boxing doesn't have a commission. It doesn't have a centralized governing body like the NFL. So, I mean, in boxing, things can move kind of slowly. I mean, we wait for the state athletic commissions to, be progressive or whatever. But the problem is that, even some of the positive things that boxing has done, some of it hasn't been so much, like the headgear and whatnot. I mean, I haven't seen any evidence that says it's better. But, I mean, again, if boxing really wanted to clean up its act, again, I think you go towards the more, the brutal aspect of the sport. I mean, you can train the judges to be better, to be more cautious, maybe have, I don't know, maybe you give them courses on, like the signs and whatnot. I mean, you can always have the training better for the judges, the referees, the medical people who are working ringside. Honestly, that's all I think you can do to make the sport a bit safer if you want to, is, the same day weigh-ins, increase the training, make the gloves smaller.
I also think this, Jeremiah. I think the big thing is, if a fight is stopped in the corner, I think that fighter should immediately be put on a gurney and taken to a hospital.
Yeah, and you should run CAT scans on them, regularly. I mean, there's certainly much more we can do. But again, Steve, the problem is we don't have a centralized governing body, so these things are not fast acting. But
all right, we got a question from Hamed from Cardiff, Wales, because I forgot his question the other night. I want to get this in. Should head guards be brought back to amateur boxing, John?
Head guards?
Headgear.
No. Headgear. Well,
to tell you the truth, John, I haven't watched amateur boxing in so long I couldn't even tell you what the hell it was. So.
Yeah, well, I haven't either, to be completely honest. This might be a better question to ask Jeremiah. because I haven't watched amateur boxing. I know they do wear headgear, but I'm not even sure what kind of headgear they wear, to be honest.
Okay, so
Jeremiah, what headgear do they wear?
Yeah. Okay. So as I said earlier, in the open class, which is the best class in the amateurs, they do not wear headgear. In anything below it, they do wear headgear. So you've got a mix of both. But again, this is because the reason they eliminated the headgear is because there's been no evidence that the headgear actually protects a guy's head. And again, I mentioned this earlier, but Teddy Atlas has talked about this at length a number of times, where there just hasn't been the evidence to support headgear. So I mean, if you want them, if you don't want them, it doesn't matter. But the thing about it is, I don't want the headgear. I think no headgear in the open class is the way to go. I mean, I think it prepares you a bit better for the professional game. You know, they still do wear padded gloves that, you know, they're heavy on the bottom parts, you know, where your knuckles are. So, you know, there is some protection there with the gloves. I mean, that certainly does make a difference. I mean, anybody who's punched with like a Reyes glove or, you know, something more professional and smaller where, you know, the weight is more evenly distributed, there's a big difference that gloves themselves can make. So if you have no headgear in the open class and you've got the big soft gloves, I don't see any problem with it at all. And I don't want the headgear personally.
All right, we got another comment. This is from Matt. Matt is in Idaho, Boise, Idaho. How many people have died in an MMA fight? Question. Now compare that with boxing. MMA refs step in immediately as soon as a fighter is hurt, blocking with their entire body. Boxing is far more dangerous because only punching is allowed, and boxing refs give you a chance even when you are busted up and bleeding. Should boxing be like the MMA when somebody gets hurt to immediately stop the fight? And I would say this. What he just explained about MMA is why I don't like to watch MMA. John?
Okay, let me ask one question.
Okay,
let me
Steve.
ask one question.
Go ahead.
Let me ask one question. How many people have died in NASCAR since the Haas device has been introduced into NASCAR?
All right. Number one,
None.
my question is this.
It's zero.
This is about boxing,
These guys
not
are hitting
NASCAR.
walls at
Wait a
200
second.
miles in walls.
You're talking
No,
about a
it's the same
sport.
thing, Mike.
It's
the same
not,
kind of
Steve.
violence.
Steve, it's not.
It's the same
Boxing,
kind of violence.
hey, the oldest two professions in the world are prostitution and boxing. And they may be the two
That
scummiest,
doesn't make it any
but
smarter.
no, because what you don't understand still is this. You don't understand any of it because you are like my wife, who tonight is like, why do people play boxing? They don't. They are boxers. This is the thing. And it was once said by former heavyweight champion Rocky Balboa, John, fighters fight. And this is the thing. The guys that do this know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly how this can end. And they choose to do this. So why do you think, as a person that is not them, why do you think you should be able to tell them what they can do with their own body?
Yeah, exactly, Mike. And that's the thing. This is America. We can't tell somebody, look, this is really risky. I don't want you to do this, because any of us, I would think, no matter what the sport, if somebody came up to Steve and said, look, you can't play basketball because when you're under the hoop, you're going to get elbowed in the face and it might break your nose. I don't think you're going to care. If you love it, you're going to do it. And we don't have the right to tell somebody, as we were saying a little while ago, who might not have any options, to tell them, look, you can't do this. We can't. They know the danger. Trust me. They know it, and they're okay with it. And that question, I absolutely agree with you, Mike. That's why I won't watch the MMA, because there have been so many examples. Now, people can think what they want about this, but there have been so many examples where a boxer, Jeremiah brought this up, is reeling. He's in bad shape. He's been knocked down. I mean, Archie Moore.
Go watch Foreman and Lyle.
Exactly. And then he wins. And that's what makes it so tremendous to watch boxing. Because a guy, wait, let me finish. A guy is in. You can't take it away from a guy when think of it like basketball for a second. What if the basketball team is rallying?
You there, John?
I'm here.
Jeremiah?
I'm here.
John? John.
Power cut off on the East Coast again.
Did we lose John?
Thunderstorm.
All right, go ahead, Steve.
We lost John. Why can't we just make boxing more safer?
Why
Just
can't
make
it ruins
you
it.
just why can't you just face the fact that why do you think that boxers should be told what they're allowed to do? I mean, this is what they want to do.
Mike, I go back to NASCAR and I say,
Oh God.
I go back. I use this. I know it's my battle versus your battle.
No, it isn't, because there's no battle. My question is very simple. Wait a second. This is the thing.
Keep their helmets on safe so they
Okay,
wouldn't
I don't
snap
care
their
about
neck.
that right now, Steve.
We
My
found
question,
safer ways.
Steve, my question is this. This has nothing to do with NASCAR. We're talking about men here.
No,
all right?
no, it is nothing.
And
No, it's
the
an
thing is
example.
this.
It's
My
metaphor.
question, once again, Steve, is this. Why do you feel it's all right to tell a man who wants to do something for a living that he loves to do that he can't? Because I hate to tell you this. If you put headgear on a boxer, nobody's paying to see it. Nobody's watching it. And then they've got to go get a job being a greeter at fucking Walmart. So, once again, tell me how you can tell these men who accept this risk that they should not have the freedom to do what they want with their lives.
Yeah, I cannot answer that question, Mike. Touche. You win that one.
And
I cannot
see,
answer
that is the
because
thing,
that's
though.
what you want to do.
The
But
was-
that's
what I want to do.
Sport is to win, not to kill.
Oh, geez. And nobody's
And-
out here trying to kill anybody. You're trying to knock them out. In football, you cannot tell me when a Houston Texan breaks through the line and they see Andrew Luck, they're trying to knock him out.
Yep.
Because if you knock out Andrew Luck, you're going to win the game, Steve. And if we're boxing and I knock you out, I just won. And the object is to win by whatever means necessary, because that's the way man is supposed to behave. Man doesn't behave that way anymore because you got participation trophies and everybody's basically a freaking pussy. So this is the thing. If two men want to fight and they're getting paid to do it, let them fucking fight. Because it's
I
nobody's
agree.
business but
Fine,
theirs.
fine.
And if a bunch of
problem.
people want to pay them to see it, that's even better, Steve. And the thing is, if you want to race a NASCAR, you put it like this. If all of a sudden NASCAR racers, whatever you call them, are all racing with no helmets and they're allowed to like shoot each other while they're driving, the ratings would go up big time.
Yeah, they're driving.
It'd be
They're
Mad
driving, like,
Max.
drop tops and
It'd be like
stuff.
Mad Max.
Yeah, they're driving.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing that I think this is a good point too, that Max Kellerman actually made on his ESPN show, and he said if you're watching two guys, throw a ball with one another, and then alongside it some guys are like shooting hoops or something, and then to the side of that two guys are punching each other in the face, what are you going to watch? There's an inherent draw in boxing itself. That's why it used to be the most popular sport. I mean, this is why, the ancient Greeks were doing it, the ancient Romans were doing it, the Egyptians were doing it. I mean, again, there's an inherent draw to it because of its archaic value. But another thing to answer your question, Steve, is you keep asking, why don't they put vests on or why don't they put headgear on? You lose the entertainment value. Boxing is, I already answered this, boxing is already a niche sport. If you were to put guys in fucking helmets, put them in vests, and just, let it be a professional fencing contest with fists, you already get that. You already get that in amateur boxing below the open class. So if that's what you're into, feel free to watch that. But there's a reason why people don't like watching that sort of boxing. Anything below the open class, people don't generally care about. In fact, my brother had a guy go to the Junior Olympics up in Wisconsin a few months back, or maybe it was last month, and they were wearing headgear. Nobody really gave a crap except for their family members. So there's a draw to being knocked out, the violence of the sports, and also you got to get off the knockout thing too, because that's not all guys are in it for. Plenty of guys win in various ways.
All right, let me go off the deep end here, and this is a deep end.
We're already off the deep end, but go ahead.
It's a deep end. Yeah, Michael Vick buys pit bulls and buys small dogs to train his pit bulls, and they feed and kill on the dogs. Is that a sport?
No,
really?
because this is the thing, Steve. Right now, you're comparing an animal with no free will because they're trained to do that. You're comparing that to a person with free will.
Yeah.
But it was a sport. People bet on it.
No, it's not a sport.
Not a
Just
sport.
because people bet on it don't mean it's a
sponsored by
sport.
betting company.
I hate to tell you
We're
this,
sponsored.
but people play soccer and people bet on it. It's still not a sport.
Soccer's not a sport. It's the most watched sport in the world.
It's stupid. Because you know what? It's a bunch of guys running around in shorts that aren't man enough to play American football.
I don't care. You say what you
Yeah,
want. Soccer is the most watched sport
I
in the
would
world.
still like to know. See, the most watched sports in history were probably heavyweight prize fights. I mean, what was the number on Ali Spinks
not even
2?
close.
Just
Not
shut
even
up. When you
close.
don't know what you're talking about, it's best to be quiet and let the adults talk. What was the amount of people that watched Ali Spinks 2 worldwide, Jeremiah?
2 billion. 2 billion.
2 billion.
Okay.
2 billion. That's
And
billion
how many people
with
watch
a
the
B.
Super Bowl? I don't even want to get in that discussion.
The Super Bowl?
I don't.
There are
I
300
don't know the
million
answer
people
to that
watch
question,
that.
so I don't even
I
want to
do.
go there.
So you can ask the question. There's never been.
Ask.
I mean, that was 2 billion people when the world was about 5 billion people. That's half the world's population watched Ali Spinks too. And I guarantee you this. Everybody knew who Muhammad Ali was the world over. So
Hey, Jeremiah.
Go ahead.
Jeremiah, look up
What?
real quickly how many people are watching the Tour de France right now. I guarantee you it's about that big.
I guarantee you it's not, because there aren't that many Frenchmen.
Oh, over the course of the whole event, yeah.
Okay, so you're going to
29
count an event that lasts 30 days to see how much people watch it. And it's not a sport.
Yeah. And you're talking about one boxing event that happened 40 years ago.
That's kind of my point, Steve. It happened 40 years ago, where TV wasn't as available
Right.
as it is now, and where there weren't 8 billion people in the world, there was 4 or 5 billion people, and half of those people watched that fight. Now, there are not fights that are that big, that often, but you know what? The World Cup only happens every 4 years, Steve. So if there's a huge fight every 4 years, and it is, I mean, the point is this: Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather had 5 million people pay $100 a piece to watch it. I don't think that there's 5 million people in this country that would pay $100 to watch the World Cup. And worldwide, they're probably not either, because most of those countries.
NBC Sports, you get it free.
Yeah,
So
because
you
you
get it free on
can't
cable.
charge somebody $100 to watch the World Cup.
Right. No.
Now here,
But it doesn't mean
hold
it's
on, Tour de
watch. It
France,
doesn't mean
let's
it's
get
not
it. The
watch,
numbers have
so.
jumped on the Tour de France. So let's see what the numbers on the Tour de France are.
Let's get back on track. I just think
Well,
boxing
you asked
needs
a
to get
question. Here you go. 7.3 million people viewed the Tour de France this year, which is the highest ratings in 15 years. So there's your answer. 7.3 million. So it is bigger than a WNBA game, but not much.
That's funny.
Actually, it would
That
take
cracks
like
me
10 WNBA games to get 700 people to view, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're right. Touche. I just think boxing.
And I
needs
thought
to
that
get
I
back.
banned the word touche from
being-
you like a month ago.
Yeah, you did, but you know.
Because it's a
Whatever.
stupid word. See, this all adds up now, Jeremiah. The word touche and the constant references to the Tour de France.
Well, I mean, there's, I mean, again, there's a lot of nuance to that debate too. I mean, the boxing doesn't have a centralized governing body, so it doesn't have
Right.
the sort of, it doesn't have the media dollars that the NFL has or the MLB or any of that
or the
stuff.
World
So,
Cup and FIFA, but people still watch it. And when it's a big fight, I mean, come on, you know,
Really watch it.
Yeah, they really watch
Okay.
it.
Okay, so let me ask you guys a question. You guys are the boxing geniuses of the GrowingTruth.com.
No, of every place.
Why don't you push for a governing body?
Because there's
committee?
never going to be a governing body because there's too much money in it and there's too many people that are just out for themselves to make money off of fighters. And the problem is this. It doesn't take us to push it because we have pushed that. We've pushed it for the entire 4 or 5 years me and Jeremiah have been on here. But the problem is this. We can push it because we are the grueling truth, where we will tell you what we think it is. The problem is most of these websites are bought and paid for by certain places. I mean, the Boxing News 24, whatever it is, I mean, come on. You can see Golden Boy's imprints all over it whenever they write a story, especially Aragon Garcia. So the thing is, we can push this all we want, but everybody else pushes that everything's rosy because they're all getting paid for it.
yeah, because it's like I mean, that's the thing with boxing is I've been railing about a centralized governing body in boxing for a long, long time. I mean, the problem is the powers that be don't want it. They're happy staying in their own lane and making money there. But the thing about it, like Mike said, is that boxing has become so compromised that it's a very difficult game, right? And not only do you have Boxing News 24, you've got Ring Magazine, which is one of the oldest continuous publications in the U.S. It's run by Golden Boy Promotions, so a former fighter controls it. On top of that, you have Boxing Scene, which is the most highly trafficked boxing website. All you got to do is go to their front page. They are sponsored by the WBA and the IBO, which are two alphabet organizations that dish out quote unquote world titles. So I mean, this stuff, the rot is at the root, and it would take a big power play to change things. And I'm not of the opinion that it can never happen. I'm pretty positive about the matter, but it would just take a lot of money and you might even need government intervention. I don't know, but you need some outside help in something serious, but nobody cares enough.
All right, we have a question or a comment from Hamed. And Hamed, I'm very disappointed that you would rip me. But Mike, you're wrong on soccer. I'm with Steve. Only Americans don't like soccer because they suck at soccer. The reason Americans suck at soccer, Hamed, is because we have better sports to play. And Hamed, when I make the fun about soccer, I'm just teasing. So don't take it so seriously. But yeah, we have better sports to play like American football. But still, I'm teasing, Hamed.
Agreed.
And I think
Agreed,
this,
Mike.
when you
Agreed,
look at
big
soccer, Hamed, this is the thing. I know it's a big sport. It's not in America, so we don't really cover it that much here. So I'm just kind of shitting around with it. I know that it is one of, if not the most watched sports in the world. And you do have to remember, though, the American women's team doesn't suck because they won it all. So
That is right.
go. And we talked about that once, I think, Steve.
Yep, we're going to try and do a show on that here in the next week.
And
or two,
Hamed, I
hopefully.
know you were just kidding too because you knew I was kidding. That was Hamed's next comment. So I love Hamed. Hamed is my favorite person from Cardiff, Wales.
Not Joe Calzaghe.
Oh, Hamed, you're second because I love Joe Calzaghe. Joe Calzaghe's a bad man, as Stephen A. Smith would say. And he's very underrated. So I don't know what Hamed thinks about Joe Calzaghe. But I really like Joe, and I really liked his dad, too. It was cool to watch them kind of do what they did, especially when they whooped Bernard Hopkins' ass. And he did beat Bernard
All right,
Hopkins,
guys.
no matter what anybody said. So,
I've got to go
Steve,
eat
what do
dinner
you
with my
think?
family
Steve,
and watch
what do you
Jeopardy.
Really? You got to go watch Jeopardy like a little girl?
Yeah, I've got to get off here.
Why
You
don't you
and
take the
Jeremiah
dogs
can
out
show
back
up.
and play a little soccer with them when you get done watching Jeopardy?
We've been in the pool for 3 hours. We've been in the pool for 3 hours.
Well, see, you can
finally
do
getting
that,
dogs
Steve,
turned.
because you're so old that you're already wrinkled before you get in, so you don't have to worry about getting all wrinkly.
There you go.
I haven't got the rip on Steve for a while. Also, I want to remind everybody before Steve goes that me and Steve Risley will be back Thursday. We're going to talk a little
Yes, we
NFL on
will.
Thursday on Survive in Advance, Steve.
I'm hoping to. Training camp opens up. Let's get it going.
So, Survive in Advance, Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern.
I want to close with this. I think boxing is a great sport.
No, you don't,
But I
Steve,
don't
or you
think
wouldn't have been on here.
I don't think that the purpose is to kill somebody or knock somebody out. I think the purpose is to score points with clean shots, clean punches, and good hits, jab.
Wow.
You know, and I don't think that's the purpose. That's my opinion. I mean, I played against some of the greatest basketball players in the world, and my purpose was not to kill them. That was not my purpose. It was to stop them and to beat them and to win the game.
By any
Hopefully
means
the game.
necessary, correct, Steve?
No,
Steve,
no,
come
no,
on.
No,
That's how I
No.
always played.
that was not the ultimate. That was not by any means necessary. No, it was not. Because you could easily go watch North Dallas 40 or watch any movie where it said, take Weeks out and break his knee, and you can see, that was not the purpose of the game. The purpose is to win the game or win the match,
By any
win
means
the sport.
necessary.
And I just wish that boxing would come into the new ages and say, we got to be safer. And that's the whole reason I came on this show
I would
tonight.
too, as
I'm
long
not
as
a
it's
regular
not
on this
with
show.
headgear
I don't
and
do
padding.
this show. Well, if it's to score points and to win based on points, and if a knockout happens, it happens. But I think the protection of the sport is not climbed with the level of where it should be. That's my point of boxing. I don't watch it very much. I've seen the big fights of all time. Everyone, Mike, you and I have talked about. Jeremiah, we've talked about them. But it's not to just beat the shit out of somebody else. It should be about.
I don't know about
and
you,
Jeremiah,
but I've
you said
never
it.
been in a fight where my goal wasn't beat the shit out of the other person. How about you, Jeremiah?
Yeah, it's a fight, man. Let's. Well, I don't think we need to water it down. I don't think we need to water the game down itself. Again, you don't get, like you said, you don't get in a fight to fucking pity pat with somebody and score points.
Yeah, you want to break their jaw.
Yeah, man. There's like I said, there's an archaic element to the sport. You got to leave it as is. I mean, listen, this is why we've talked about the UFC. I mean, not that much because I'm not that big of a fan either.
Yeah,
and like
stupid.
the guy from Boise, Idaho said, they step in and stop it earlier. Well, I just wanted to answer that question real quick too, but it's what I already said. It's the ebbs and flows in boxing that you can't get anywhere else. The fact that you're allowed to go on, there's that glimmer of hope. And oftentimes, no, the guy who scores a knockdown ends up winning, but not all the time. And again, that's what makes the sport dramatic. So again, I don't want to water down the sport. It is a fight. Okay. I want to leave it at that. I don't want it to be a gloved fencing match. I mean, I understand your concerns, Steve, but don't water down the sport. Again, train the refs, train the ringside physicians, train the referees, make sure the medical staff is on their game. Maybe even here's another suggestion. I'm not quite sure what sort of training the trainers of boxers get, but maybe we can add, like if we had a centralized commission, we could add medical training to the trainers themselves. Maybe they can step in sooner. Maybe they can see the signs sooner. There's a lot we can do. but it's not watering down the sport. Again, I think you go more towards the UFC route, and this is why it continues to gain popularity. I mean, remember when the UFC was young? And again, I'm kind of indifferent to the UFC.
No
it's not that
I liked it with no rules.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and initially you had politicians in America saying that it was legalized cockfighting, right?
Yeah.
That these guys were
Hey,
brutal and they were vicious.
Don't say cock on the show. There could be kids listening.
You know, well, and I might get Steve might get a rise out of the term cockfighting too. But my
Ooh. Damn,
no,
did Jeremiah just turn on Steve?
I like you. I like you, Steve. But what I'm saying, there's a lot we can do. But UFC is so popular partially because they've got marketing dollars, and you know, again, that's a different debate. But it's also because they use small gloves, and you get a lot of knockouts. I've seen it time and time again. I shit you not. I have very little interest in the women's boxing game, but I know a lot of people who don't like women's boxing but pay attention to women's UFC. And it's because you get knockouts in women's UFC. You've got 3-ounce gloves. They only cover your knuckles, and that's it. Again, you don't need to de-emphasize the knockouts, the brutality of the sport. You just got to make everything else safer.
All right, Steve. Thanks for coming on. Go watch Jeopardy.
And the final Jeopardy question is, Alex, what is it?
Well, what is it?
I don't know. I'm going to go watch it.
Oh, well, go watch it. We will talk to you later, Steve. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me, guys. I mean, I enjoyed the conversation tremendously. You guys are both geniuses.
But there's three of us, and we're all three geniuses.
All three, damn it.
Yeah. But, all right, thanks for calling in, Steve.
Bye.
Bye, Steve.
Yeah.
All right, see, that's what happens when you challenge us to come on the show. We make you look like a fucking idiot, and then you have to go.
Maybe he learned something. Maybe he learned because he kind of conceded at the end, guys. So maybe he heard us. Maybe he understands a little. People are never going to completely get it. We know that. Your wife is never going to completely get it.
We have a comment from Canada. Lucas Weiss, who says 2 billion people watched Ali Spinks. 2 billion people watched the 1998 World Cup final. Boxing is like the movie Gladiator. It's a battle. I will bring up this, though. In 1978, when Ali and Spinks fought, there was about 2 billion less people in the world also. So you still had a bigger percentage of viewing population watching Ali Spinks 2 than you did the 1998 World Cup.
Yeah, that's
Good
true.
point.
And this tells you how popular Muhammad Ali was, too. He was an international icon, as we know. We've been over that a million times. If anybody ever comes around who's like him again, I think boxing will be popular.
Well,
Not
and
maybe
fairly
like,
for soccer, I would say this. Probably during that time, Pele was like Ali because you remember Pele came to the New York Cosmos in the NASL, and then all of a sudden they're selling out the New Jersey Meadowlands because even people in this country who didn't like soccer knew who Pele was and wanted to see him play. So it's probably an unfair comparison to compare any soccer game ratings with Pele or boxing ratings with Ali because those guys run a class all by themselves.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And when you get that popular like that, obviously it lifts your sport up, and icons tend to do that. So, that was a different time when Pele was. Hell, even I knew when Pele was playing, and I never really liked soccer
I
either,
even watched it once for like 5 minutes, and I thought, why the hell do people watch this?
Well,
Nobody got hit.
I also think, I do think it's also worth noting that comparing something to Ali is, that is sort of the extreme, but it's not really, I think, when you put things into perspective. I mean, boxing has that sort of potential. In fact, very few sports have the worldwide potential like boxing does.
Yeah.
Baseball is not really a global sport like
soccer
boxing
is probably the only other sport that has that kind of global reach like boxing because all corners of the world will watch a fight. And I guess all corners of the world watch guys walk around and kick a ball in long socks. So.
No, see, that's actually perfect, Mike. What you said, guys will watch a fight. And that's back to the point that I've been making the entire show. Fighting is natural. It's something that comes to all of us, something we all witness. So that in itself has a broader appeal.
Wait a second, though.
Than,
this is what I think, which makes this appeal even broader. I don't think it is something that comes natural to everybody, because I think there's probably a portion, at least 50 to 60% of the population, that doesn't want to get in a fight. They just want to watch other guys fight because they're afraid to.
Right, but it's because of the drama inherent to fighting itself. I think, again, I do think there's a natural appeal to it because it takes place all in nature. You look at it like, these gorillas are fighting, for mating rights, and these, it happens in the animal kingdom all the time. I just think there's something inherent to it, whether or not somebody actually wants to engage in the fight themselves. But that itself has broader appeal than having a stick and hitting a ball, right? Like cricket or like baseball.
Yeah,
or
but how
football.
about this?
Don't
you think baseball ratings would be much higher if you kept the bat with you after you hit the ball and you could just wail on the first baseman so you could get safe?
Yeah, or you guys.
And maybe the first baseman had a club too.
Yeah, or like or maybe you dropped the bat and then you grabbed onto his jersey and you went at it like hockey.
Well, and the thing is this,
I
don't think hockey's ratings, and if Lucas is listening in from Canada, he could answer this, but I don't think that hockey ratings have been as good since they cut down on the fighting, John.
I don't think so either, and you guys made me think about them. Think about it when baseball players, when it happens where somebody throws a high pitch or whatever and a guy gets mad, the crowd goes bonkers.
And it's the lead story on ESPN SportsCenter.
There you go, see? So they got into a fight. Everybody loves it because you go, that's it. I'm not taking that anymore. And most of us understand that, and he charges them out, and all the other guys come running out. It's kind of cool. I mean, let's be honest. You're like, okay, that I get it. So that's that thing. I mean, that's not necessarily tied to boxing, but it's fighting. So, yeah, you're right, Mike. I mean, because half of them or less, not many men really want to fight. But there's a desire to get over there and get aggressive.
Yeah, there's a desire to be a man and get in a fight.
Yeah, exactly. And some of them do it, most of them don't.
Yeah,
Unless
most people just want to sit back and call boxers bums.
Yeah.
Well, that's the worst thing they can do, and that won't not happen.
But you know that every time there's a fight on, somebody's calling somebody a bum. And
well, we know
this
who's
is the
doing
key. If you were sitting there calling any boxer a bum, you're not a boxing fan, but you are probably a bum.
Yes. Well, that's right. Look in the mirror.
What's the old saying? It takes one to know one. But
right.
All right, we're like an hour and 33 minutes in. Jeremiah, you got anything before we wrap it up?
I'm happy Steve came on. He made the show a bit lively. It was kind of nice to have a counter voice to the whole thing.
Well, see, we've had this argument about like the headgear on Survive in Advance before, so I know he would like this. And I called him before the show, but he didn't answer. And then we started doing the show, and then he started asking these questions, and then he asked to come on. So it worked out the way I wanted it to anyways. It just took a little bit longer to get it going.
Yeah, I know. It was fine to me. I mean, it was, in fact, he kind of represented a lot of what you would hear from the general public. I mean, people who are unaware of the sport, people who are not involved. I mean, a lot of people are like that, especially out west. I mean, boxing was even banned in, Norway for a while and just recently became legalized. So, I mean, these are things that people are wondering about and why you do that. And admittedly, I live in a pretty nice area in Colorado. And, if I were to ask people about boxing, like you said earlier, a lot of people who grow up rich or, grow up, in America, it's waned anyways, but, the participation levels are not what they used to be, and that's because the poverty levels continuously dropped. But yeah, these would be questions that a lot of people would ask. It's like, and it's very simple. Why would you do this? And I hope we've answered that question sufficiently. And I hope if, we have listeners tuning in, I hope they were satisfied with the results.
Yeah, and I would like to thank everybody that had a question or a comment. I think there was like somewhere between 8 to 10 there. We had a bunch of other ones, but I just ignored them. And it wasn't because it was not good questions, but they were all kind of similar to what was being said. John Raspanti, anything else you want to add?
No, I think Jeremiah summed it up. The thing I liked was, and you guys are right, bringing Steve on was great, because it does make it more interesting for people to listen to hear another side. And then we did tell him, and hopefully people that listen that don't know, that there have been improvements made. Boxing, even with all its problems and all its corruption and all its greed, has made attempts to do things to make the sport a little safer. People complain all the time. Well, maybe not all the time. Quite a bit about the shortening from 15 to 12 rounds, because so many things happen later in fights that are so dramatic. So boxing has tried to, and I like that. I like that people heard that aspect of it, because I guess Steve didn't know that. So, having him come on talking about this the way we did, I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as I did.
All right, and also, if you want something to enjoy as a boxing fan, make sure you check out Intimate Warfare, written by John Raspanti and Dennis Taylor, pictures by Ed Mulholland. It's about the Gotti Ward trilogy. Great book. You can find it on Amazon, so make sure you go look for Intimate Warfare by John Raspanti and Dennis Taylor. I want to thank Steve Risley for coming on tonight, and remind everybody we'll be back on Survive in Advance Thursday at 1 o'clock to do a little NFL preview show, training camp preview. Tomorrow night, Jeremiah, are we on at 9 or 11? Or 9:30 or
11? I'm not sure yet. Depends on John, but it looks like probably 11.
All right, so we'll be back with Inside Boxing Daily tomorrow night at 11. And John Raspanti, you're welcome to come back if you want to talk a little Manny Pacquiao.
I might just do that. You guys better be careful.
All right. We always love having John on. Don't forget Intimate Warfare. People need to buy that book if they haven't yet. Great book. Damn, I sound like such a shill. You better be paying me for this, John. I'm just kidding.
I know.
But also, I want to bring up this, because you're going to have a special guest on the Ringside Boxing Show for Sunday night, correct?
We are, and I'm really excited. So Dennis took a few weeks, but we got Teddy Atlas coming on, and we're going to ask him some good questions. We're going to talk boxing. We're going to talk steroids. We're going to talk all kinds of things. We're going to talk about Teddy's amazing career, and Teddy, he tells it like it is, and I like that. I've always liked him. I don't care if people get mad at me about that. I don't care. I've always said he tells it like it is, and I like that. I like the guy. He's a straight shooter. So, Dennis and I are both excited about it. So, Sunday, Teddy Atlas on the Ringside Boxing Show.
Yeah, and you can find that on thegruelingtruth.com Sunday night, somewhere around 8 o'clock, 8:30, or whenever Dennis sends it to me. Sometimes he's early, sometimes he's late. But we'll probably, if you get on there at 9 o'clock at night, you're going to find the interview with Teddy Atlas. I'm pretty sure of that. Also, tomorrow night at 9 o'clock, we'll have the CFL Weekly Pick'em Show with myself, Brian Schmidt, and CFL legendary running back for the Toronto Argonauts and the BC Lions, Robert Drummond. So make sure you check that out also. Remember, betnow.eu for all your gambling needs. You want to bet on any baseball, or you just want to put some money in to get ready for football season, the NFL, college football, all coming up very soon. So make sure you go on betnow.eu. Use the promo code TRUTH50 to get a 50% cash back bonus up to your first deposit up to $1,000. And if you're ready for the NFL season, you can go to thegruelingtruth.com, find all kind of legends interviews. I just recently interviewed Jeff Driscoll, who was the starting quarterback for the Bengals the last half of last season, and the Chicago Bears are probably going to drop off, not make the playoffs this year, but that's all right, because John Raspanti still loves them. Well, You know, y'all got a lot of turnovers last year, and usually the teams that drop off the most are the teams that got a lot of turnovers the year before, because it's hard to do that in back-to-back years, John.
We'll see, Mike. That's all I got to say. We'll see.
But, all right,
hopefully
we'll just get the long-awaited Bears-Bengals Super Bowl.
Okay, I'm in.
Okay, I'm in too. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I want to remind everybody you can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Steve Risley, John Raspanti, Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.